What's poppin', y'all? You are now watching another episode of the WizeFool Music TV show. That's right. This month, our special guest is Frank Morales. Frank Morales is an Episcopal priest and activist in New York City. Frank Morales first got involved with politics after the assassination of JFK, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King as a member of the Assassination Information Committee. In 2003, he founded the campaign to demilitarize the police in New York City, and that is what we are going to be talking about today. Mr. Frank Morales, how are you?
I'm very good, and really great to be with you.
Oh, it is an honor. It is an honor. What is Posse Comitatus?
The Posse Comitatus Act was a piece of legislation that was passed in 1878, which mandates that the military should not be involved in domestic law enforcement. It seeks to enforce a strict separation between the function of law enforcement and the military function, and as such represent a codification of a legal mandate which undergirds the historical tradition within America of removing the military from domestic affairs. As you know, during the period of the Revolution and so forth, there was this whole issue of stationing soldiers. They could come and take your home over, and so on and so forth. Well, this is part of a long tradition within the history of this country of separating the military function from the function of law enforcement. So the Posse Comitatus Act, which is a criminal statute, it makes reference to the potential for fines and/or prison for the infringement of the military within the context of domestic law enforcement. It seeks to enforce a strict separation between the two. Don't forget, one of the telltale signs of a police state, when you're talking in those terms, is the symbiosis, or the identification between the law enforcement function and the military function. And when those two come together, that's a dangerous thing, and this law seeks to keep the strict separation between the two.
What is taking place now with Posse Comitatus and the Patriot Act? Posse Comitatus was mentioned in the Patriot Act.
Yeah, well, over the years, going back as many years ago as the late 60s, there's been an increasing development, which we can refer to as the militarization of the police. And people understand that in terms of the growing use on the part of the police of weaponry that had heretofore been, strictly used by the military. All this, emergency services equipment, the SWAT stuff, the setting up of so-called homeland defense capacity, but to actually encourage the public to seek out ways to demilitarize their local police department. The military is trained to execute military operations to annihilate the population if necessary.
You wrote a paper entitled U.S. Military Civil Disturbance Planning, The War at Home. Now, it was excellent. It was excellent. A couple of years ago, there was a vibration throughout the mass population that indirectly suggested that there was a silent military takeover via the use of mind control technology. Do you believe that took place?
In terms of what you're getting at, yeah, I mean, there are various, for instance, I'll just use one example. One of the weapons I was referring to, which is called, it's a microwave weapon that uses pulse kind of microwave energy to, it's a heat weapon. The microwave, the crowd dispersal weapon that heats skin to 130 degrees, like touching a light bulb, and you feel this from a couple hundred yards away. So this particular weapon can be tuned, quote unquote, tuned to such an extent that you feel the heat of it. Crowd is standing on a street corner and they aim this weapon at you and everybody starts to scatter because all of a sudden your skin starts to boil. This weapon can manifest similar kinds of electric current within the body, within the brain. So it can kind of connect itself to the frequencies that we run on. And utilizing in this way, and there are Pentagon studies on this, they can create a certain kind of geometry, a certain kind of fix within these weapons that mimics anger, that mimics panic, and so forth. So suddenly a group of people begin to feel this kind of anxiety and don't really understand where it's coming from. They don't feel heat necessarily, but they feel anxious. And that's because the rheostatic nature, the tunability of these weapons allows for them to be used in a kind of mind control way. And these can be used over vast stretches of population, utilizing these microwave electromagnetic pulse weapons that exist. So my guess is that, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any question that the issue of mind control looked at from the point of view of this advanced, ominous technology comes out of the places like Defense Advanced Research Project, DARPA, and some other agencies, has this capability. How it's utilized along with the other kinds of mind control that I'm talking about, which is generalized, which has to do with the propaganda that we hear every day, and is an important aspect that needs to be dealt with in order for us to not only change things, but to raise consciousness so that people have a sense of why things need to be changed and how to do it. For instance, there's a corporation, a group known as the Firearms Training System, or FATS, F-A-T-S,
Yes.
Firearms Training Systems Incorporated.
Yes.
They're based in Georgia. They are one of the premier training groups that trains local police departments, the LAPD, the NYPD, various other training. They also train the Marines. When they train them in marksmanship, quick shoot reflex, and so forth, and they do this through a form of operant conditioning. This is a group that trained the NYPD, or the Street Crimes Unit, and some of these people that were responsible for the Diallo situation were trained by this particular agency. They use video simulation, and of course, in the videos, you can imagine who the so-called perps, what they look like. These guys are trained to react on instinct. Now, how could they possibly let these guys off? 41 shots. I mean, what went on here? Well, if you look closely at the trial, the firearms training system training that they received allows for it, even within its own brochure, the police to skirt liability around these incidents. They suggest that they were trained to act this way, therefore they're not culpable, they're not responsible.
Ladies and gentlemen, we were just speaking with New York City activist Frank Morales. Check him out on the internet. He has a number of papers on the demilitarization of the police. A very good activist, very knowledgeable on what's taking place.